Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, a Texas government affairs consultancy, Claire and Carl Stewart, and by Laura and John Beckworth, Hobby Family Foundation.
I'm Evan Smith. She's a celebrated actress, model, philanthropist, and filmmaker, currently performing her one-woman show, Link Link Circus, in venues around the country. She's Isabella Rossellini. This is Overheard.
Let's be honest. Is this about the ability to learn, or is this about the experience of not having been taught properly? How have you avoided what has befallen other nations in Africa? And you could say that he made his own bed, but you caused him to sleep in it. You know, you saw a problem and over time took it on. And let's start with the sizzle before we get to the steak. Are you going to run for president? I think I just got an F from you, actually. This is over.
Isabella Rossellini, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on this show. What a creative output this is, this show. What an interesting show. Not at all what I think most people are expecting from you.
Well, what happened was that I always loved animals since I was a little girl.
Right.
And then as you become older, you work less as a model and less as an actress. So I went back to university to have a master's degree on animal behavior and conservation, and I created a show.
Right. In fact, you just finished your degree,
I just finished in May.
Yeah.
But I created a show while I was studying, and the show is a little circus, and it's about animals, and do they think, do they feel, and I have my little dog with me too.
Your sweet little dog is a part of the show.
Yes, she's part of the show.
It's called Link Link Circus. The circus part is, it really is kind of presented in some respects as a circus, right?
Yes, it's a kind of a theatrical lecture, but a lot of it I want to, so what I would like, if you come, I would like you to go, ha 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 ha, like you're going to circus, but then go, like you, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yes, because that was my feeling when I went to the university. I went because I loved animals and I had some questions about them. But the surprise to discover the science of animal behavior, cognitive, do they think, do they, how much they are like us and how much they are not like us.
Well, you learned something. And in fact,
I learned so much.
The Link Link part is based, as you've said, on the idea, as Charles Darwin said, that we have a link between humans and animals, which some people deny or doubt, but in fact it's undeniable, right?
It's undeniable. Genetically, we know that we share a lot with them. And so if we share a lot with them, and we recognize that we have skeleton structures that are similar, you know, the bones that form our hand are the same bone that become a bat wings or a whale thing. So why wouldn't it also be the brain that we would have those differences but also similarities? And that's what I've studied.
And so for people who have not seen this, there are short films, little comic films, there's a puppeteer or a bunch of puppets, there's animation. It's really a kind of a collection of things that come together here. And it's about emotions and the brain of animals, and it sort of runs the gamut.
It runs the gamut. But I wanted to introduce it in a funny way, because I'm an entertainer.
Oh, it's very
Most of all, I am an entertainer.
Well, I must say, I mean, there's parts where you're dressed up as Aristotle and Darwin and, you know.
And sometimes I'm dressed up like a bird or a shrimp or a duck.
Can I say, may I say, it's weird. And you're weird, but in the very best way. And I mean, this is the part that really was so amazing to me, or is amazing to me, is that you go into this thinking, well, Isabella Rossellini is doing a one-woman show, and it is nothing like anybody will have seen before.
Already.
In fact, I can't think of anything exactly like this.
Well, I think that I discovered, you know, so when you work as a model or you work as an actress, you are taking a trip into the mind of the writer or the director.
You're playing a character.
You're playing a character, and you try to interpret their vision. But when I wrote for myself, I wrote my love for animals and my interest on them, but also how stupefied I am, and this surprise, this amazement, it was what dictated the style of the show. I wanted to express the same astoundment that I have when I was a little girl, all the way till now as a mature woman.
And again, the message is that we're supposed to take away is that the relationship between animals and humans is much closer than we imagine.
It's closer than we imagine.
And there's much more going on there in the head of your little dog and our dogs.
I think we always knew. I think we always knew. I don't know if any of you has pets.
Yeah.
And we know they have emotions, but science denied it.
Yeah.
So, and I always felt a little bit like, am I an old lady that I'm attributing all these feelings to my dog? Because I don't know why. It's like I'm going crazy.
It's like a parent. You treat your animals like your kids, right?
You do. And so you're a little bit ashamed of it, you know.
Some
you're
days,
keeping like a secret.
Some days, right? Yeah.
Or if your pet dies and you're so devastated,
right?
It's like a secret club, you know, with people that lost their pets. They say, "Are you feeling what I'm feeling?" Yes. Don't tell the others.
Tell anybody, right.
Don't tell anybody. Exactly. I'm devastated.
Right. Now, this is an extension, Isabella. This is an extension of a project that actually began as a different monologue and a series of shorts called Green Porno.
Yes, it started with
10
Green
years
Porno.
ago, right? 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And this was actually about the sexual behavior.
Yes, because I hadn't gone to university yet, and so
right.
No, so
you hadn't gotten high-minded. You were still down in the gutter with the rest of us.
I was still down in the gutter.
Yeah.
So if you look at my work, you see also a progression, or at least I see a progression of information. Right. At the beginning, I was astounded to find out when I went to school that in the back of my mind I knew, but I never really elaborated. You know, I thought, mammy, daddy, baby. So that must be something that exists in all animals. Some animals change sex in the middle of their life. There are some fish that are born male and become female. There are worms that are male and female at the same time, the hermaphrodite. So that was like, oh my God, this is too much fun.
Right.
This is great. So I created the Green Porno, which was, if I were a worm, I will be an hermaphrodite. And then
right. Let me just say again, weird. Okay. We're going to stick with that theme. So what you said about that project versus this project is that was below the waist.
Yeah, this one is
This new project is above the waist. Exactly. So which was more fun for you to research and to write a play about, the brain or the naughty bits?
The naughty bits, it's easy because even if I just say, can I say it on camera? Penis. Everybody goes, and you have your audience in your
public television. We can handle penises on public television. Don't worry, it's fine.
For say vagina, wow, even more.
Yeah.
But if
this is turning in a direction I didn't expect. but go on. That's fine.
Green Porno was easier.
Yeah.
When I had to talk about the brain, and I had word like cognition, consciousness.
Right. Perfect PBS word, though. Seriously.
Perfect PBS word.
Right.
Is how do you make that fun? So it was harder to make it funny.
Right.
Because it's so easy to make fun with sex because we're all prudish. So it just, even a little word will go, oh.
Right.
So it was more difficult. And that's why I think it was many years of school and many years of thinking. It took me 2 years to write. It's very light and it seems easy, but it took 2 years to write.
Well, it's a little bit more than an hour. It's not a super long.
An hour, 20 minutes.
An hour and 20 minutes. I mean, so it's not a super long show, but it's just a lot of stuff packed in there.
Yes.
And again, you walk away learning a lot.
Good.
Which is so great. You mentioned that you went back to school, so let's talk about that.
Yes.
You are in your late 60s.
Yes.
You still have a very active career in many ways. Yes. But you made a decision to go back to school at this point.
Well, you know what happened is that now. So my mom was Ingrid Bergman, a famous Hollywood actress.
I've heard of her. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. We'll get to her in a second. Yeah.
So my mom always told me, but I didn't believe her.
Yeah.
So stupid. She said, there is always a lull in a career of an actress. So you have a lot of role until you're 40, 45.
Right.
And then between 45 and 65, nothing happens.
Nothing happens, right.
Because you can't really play the love interest because you're too old, and you can't play the grandmother because you're too young, and they don't know how to place you.
Right.
And so this happened to me. And then at 65, it says works comes back. But my mom unfortunately died when she was 67.
Right.
So she was relatively young. And the same thing happened to me.
In that down period.
In that bad down period of 20 years, I had a lot of time in my hand. And I decided, instead of being like an actress waiting by the phone, as we say about actresses, waiting to get the role to go back, I just said, what else is interesting to me? And it was animals. So I went back, animal behavior. So I went back to university. Yeah. And then I created a kind of a parallel career that was still acting in the theater like I'm doing now.
But with this one subject.
And yes, and then as soon as I was working and I organized my life as a scientist, as a performer, a lot of word came back. Mama was right. After 67,
now suddenly
65, and now I'm 67.
You're in
I'm
demand
doing a
again,
film.
right?
I'm doing this. I'm doing a photo shoot with Vogue and Elle, and I represent old women, and we're still beautiful. And I'm so busy.
It's kind of great, isn't it? I know. Yeah. Well, good. You were patient, and it all came back. That's how it all goes.
I wasn't patient. It just happened, and I just thought, oh my God, my mom was right. I was saying to her, it must have been something that happened then, not now.
I was inclined to ask you how you became this person so interested in animals, but I know that your dad gave you a book when you were 14 years old, King Solomon's Ring.
And he's
an Austrian scientist wrote this book all about animal behavior. That's your first moment.
He's considered the founder of animal behavior. There were sciences about
animals. The name of the scientist is?
Konrad Lorenz.
Konrad Lorenz,
and
Austrian scientist.
Right, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1973 for having found a science of ethology or animal behavior that studies behavior. We cannot study thoughts because it's too secretive. How do you create an experiment of thought? But you can study behavior and communication, which is a manifestation of thought. And he studied animal behavior, and he founded the science for which he won the Nobel Prize. And my father gave me this book, and it remained throughout my life my hobby, my interest.
Until now.
Until now.
So let's talk about your parents and your career. So you said, you revealed the big secret that your mother is Ingrid Bergman. The other big secret is your father is the great filmmaker Roberto Rossellini. You grew up in Rome, right?
Thank you. Yes.
And you were in Rome until you were 19, is that right?
Yes, I was in Rome. So we grew up between Rome and Paris. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and Mama stayed in Paris. My parents worked a lot in France.
What was it like to be their kid? I mean, you think about two parents like that.
Yeah. I know, I'm asked that question a lot. And the truth of the matter is that I have never been the daughter of different parents, so I don't know. I don't have
Nothing
any term of comparison.
Right.
But I can tell you one thing, that when I was a little girl, first of all, your parents are your parents, and then you become a little bit aware of society. And so I knew that people were reacting strangely with my parents. It was unusual. So I would say maybe I was 7 or 8, and in school I would ask my other student, I would say, but how famous is my mom? For example, is she as famous as Greta Garbo, or is she as famous as Joan Crawford? I needed a thermometer. I couldn't really judge it myself. I was relying on my student or my other friend's student to tell me how famous she was, because to me she was Mama. My parents never talked about their career, their image. They just did what it was interesting to them and what they thought they could share with an audience.
Wonderful.
I only heard that conversation. So I was stupefied when I became an actress, and they said, what is your career move? What do you want your image to be?
You go from art to commerce very quickly, right? Isn't that it? So you moved to New York at, as I understand again, 19 or so.
Yes.
And you became a broadcast report, like a radio reporter, is that right?
Yeah, so there was a television show that was comical, but it was about news, but it was comical and very light. And I worked actually very closely with Roberto Benigni. Life is Beautiful.
Right, much later we came to know him in his Oscar
and he's an absolute genius of comical. And we were 19 both, and we worked together between 19 and 23. We started our career together.
Is this when you first met Martin Scorsese?
Yes,
you interviewed Martin Scorsese while you were a reporter.
I was a reporter doing this funny, there were interviews, but they were light and funny. Yeah.
And one thing leads to another.
I married him.
And you married him. By the way, that doesn't always happen. On behalf
you think at the end of this show we're not getting married?
Oh, look. I have one inconvenient detail in that story.
I can see it.
Yes, there it is. However, but seriously, it's like on behalf of journalism, let me just say, it doesn't always happen that way. So you married Scorsese?
Yes.
You were married for 4 years?
Yes, we were married for 4 years. We were together 6-7 years together.
And so you're married, but you're married to Scorsese at a period of time, again, as a young person just now in this country, kind of starting out her creative life. You were married to Scorsese when Raging Bull came out.
Yes, I was his wife when he was doing Raging Bull.
I mean, what must New York and that world have been?
But I think it was such a pleasure. I just remember of Raging Bull just being with him on the set. It was such an overwhelming work, and they had to stop filming to allow Robert De Niro to go from very skinny Jack LaMotta. To gain all that weight, right? To gain all that weight, Jack LaMotta old. And it was difficult, and I could see the commitment of all of of them, and that was another example. They modeled for me too.
Yeah.
Marty, Bob, all the other people that worked for them, the commitment that they had to this art. At the time I wasn't working, I was just a wife, but it was a pleasure. I would always cook for them and bring food to the set to make sure they were all eating and were feeling strong. So I remembered it as a dream. And then when, it turned out very successful, you're happy for them. But it's the process of making it that I always find the best.
Oh, the stuff behind the scenes that the rest of us don't see. So you and Scorsese were married until 82?
Yes.
And 82 is also when you begin modeling.
Yes.
Right? You sign on as the face of Lancôme.
Yes, exactly.
And you're 30 years old.
Yes.
And you're the highest paid model in the world.
Yes.
In 1982.
Yes.
What must that have been like?
Well, at first I was surprised. First of all, the total embarrassment about how much money I made. Half of me was completely happy. Half of me was saying, maybe it's a mistake. Somebody's going to come and say, return the money.
Take the money back.
Take the money back. There was a mistake. We added zero. Because I just couldn't remember. Sometimes as a model, you have to go with a voucher. And so they sign the voucher and there is the amount of money. And the agency gives you the voucher and then you work the day with the client and the client has to sign. And I would look at the amount of money. I said, no, that's a mistake. It can't be that I earned.
Too much. Way
so
too much.
I would always say, I forgot the voucher because I was too embarrassed.
Didn't want to cash it in, actually, right.
Then I was very pleased. I have to say something about money and women. And my mom also made a lot of money. She was a fantastic actress and had a big career. She didn't make as much money as she would have made it later on because she was, there was a studio system and the studio just gave her a salary and the money only went to the producer. So then the actors emancipated themselves, and now the money, if you're a top star, goes to you. And we know that that nowadays they make millions of dollars.
Yes.
But one thing that my mama did, and I learned so much from my mom, but one thing that I said I'm going to do differently than her is that she delegated people with her money. She didn't think that as a woman you could take responsibility of the money.
Manage your money.
Manage your money. You always had a manager, a husband, an agent, and she lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I thought, it's not going to happen to me.
Right, good.
If I make money, I have to own it.
Right.
And the feminist movement helped me with that.
Of course.
The feminist movement really empowers women to take responsibility of the things that happen in your life.
So the timing of that, so 82 to 96 is when you get fired by Lancôme. We'll come to that in a second. That period of time, you make a ton of money as a model.
Of money.
And you have your hands on it. Right?
Yes, and I have my hands on it. That's the part that I like the best.
I bet. I'm sure you did.
So easy that somebody else gets it.
So I want to come to the end of the Lancôme, end of Lancôme Part 1, because happily there's a Part 2
yes,
with
there's a
Lancôme.
Part 2.
But at this period of time, you also start appearing on the cover of fashion magazines.
Yes,
you were on the cover of Vogue 36 times.
Yes.
36 times. I couldn't believe it. I kept looking at that number, kind of like your voucher, and going, this number's not right.
I know.
36 times. And you were shot by Helmut Newton, Stephen Meisel, Richard Avedon, Annie Leibovitz. Every single consequential photographer shot you. Francesco Scavullo. All the people who shot those covers shot you. What was that like?
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved modeling. I loved modeling for several reasons. First of all, again, the exposure to incredible talent and see how they worked. As it was watching my parents, as it had been being married to Marty, now I was having my own career and know exactly, they felt so familiar to me, the Avedon, the Stephen Meisel, because I found again my parents, the way of thinking.
Right.
So I think they liked to work with me because I wasn't saying, oh, my best profile is right or left. I would say, what do you want? What do you want? I'm doing it for you, whatever. You know, and I wasn't interpreting, I was a vehicle for them. Because you see, they photograph emotion. They don't photograph a nose and the eyes. It's what comes out of it.
Yeah.
But the emotion that comes out of it comes out of you, but they react to it and they take the photo and it's their portrait, what they want, though it moves them in life.
Right.
And so it's your face, but there was a wall that I had to take down, unfortunately, because people thought I was completely vain. When you enter in my house, it was a wall of photo of me. It was called the Me Wall, photographed by all the different photographers. But to me, it wasn't the me wall. It was, I would see all their emotion of the different photographer and what they were seeking until somebody said, whoa, Isabella, you're really vain. Look at that. So now I took it down because I was a little bit ashamed.
Like, okay, it's too much. I look back at all those Vogue covers and I thought, I think your point is really very smart. you look at yourself on those covers, it's like 36 different Isabellas.
Yes,
it's not the same one.
Exactly. It's
right?
the portrait of who takes the photo.
It's really as much about that. I think that's exactly right. It's as much about the photographer. So you model for Lancôme from 82 to 96.
So Lancôme is extraordinary, huge, one of the biggest cosmetic company, and they gave me a huge contract where I was paid enormously, and we worked in advertisement, and I learned a lot also in advertisement, communication, and again my mom came to be a great help because my mom modeled for me how you speak to the press, to courtesy, to clarity. So I became a very good spokesperson and served Lancôme for many years, 14 years, and they never let me go for 14 years because they thought, you know, how we cannot replace her.
And
but then
one day
they could replace me because I turned 40.
Because you're too old.
Too old.
Right. I mean, the cliche about modeling is that you're young and beautiful until you're no longer young and beautiful.
Exactly.
Is actually there's some truth to that.
So I remember confronting the CEO and saying, but all the marketing research saying that women are so happy that I represent the company, why do you let me go? And he said, women dream to be young. So advertisement is about the dream, it's not about the reality.
Right.
And although we sell the cream to women that are 40 and 50, the dream is not represented by a woman that age.
Well, they really want to be 30 and 20.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Do you really want to be 30 and 20?
No.
I said to my CEO, I said, I will speak to my friends.
Right. They don't want to be 30 and 20.
They want to be elegant. They want to be sophisticated. They don't want to be younger.
Yeah, but
we want to be who we are. But they don't believe it. That's ageism. Is the belief that women only want to be a sexual object. So you're young, and it's not true. So guess what? 23 years later, after they let me go, a woman CEO came in, Françoise Liman. She had been there at the company when they let me go.
Right.
And stayed in her heart like a wound, because she was going to be one day 45. And when she became the CEO, she called me.
Said, come back.
Come back.
And be the face of Lancôme, the mature face of Lancôme, right? Isn't that great?
And she's, absolutely.
Isn't that great?
And when she called me, I said, I am 23 years older. I mean, please look at me. I haven't done anything.
Right.
But your cream, this is what you've done. And she said, and I said, why do you want to tell that story again? Because there might be controversy, and the big companies are very careful. Why don't you get Helen Mirren, Meryl Streep? You can still get a 60-year-old and not take that story that you fired me, you didn't renew my contract.
Oh, but there's one Isabella Rossellini.
No, you tell the story because this is the best. So it was so moving, and still today, something I couldn't do then, I have her cell. I call her up, she answers me. That is also a new position for model.
Right.
I can talk to the CEO and say, we did a new anti-age cream, and I called, I said, Françoise, anti-age? I don't know, can we talk about sophistication and glamour and feeling?
And she listens.
And she listens.
You have power.
And she changed it, she called it Renergie Glow.
Good.
For glamour.
Right. That's
what I want.
I hope they pay you for marketing as well as modeling. So we just have a couple minutes. You brought up Helen Mirren. I need to fact check a story that I've heard for years.
Yes.
Is it true that when you went to be in Blue Velvet, that David Lynch first wanted to cast Helen Mirren?
And I just finished a film with Helen Mirren. So David sat next to me and said, can I have her phone number? Please, she turned me down. I want Helen Mirren.
He wanted Helen Mirren for that role.
Badly.
And you convinced him, no, it should be me.
No, I didn't convince him. I said, I cannot give you her phone number.
Oh, is that what you did?
No,
you totally skunked David Lynch, really?
I said, I don't know, you don't give out the numbers of actresses. And then the next day, the door rang, and there was a messenger with the script and a note from David Lynch that said, on second thought, since I was turned out by Helen Mirren, will you consider it?
Did you know that you were doing that you were pulling a fast one on him? That's great.
No, I didn't know it, but I did.
Listen, I know that, over the years, you've said you like modeling more than acting.
Yes.
That's true?
Yes, I explain why. Sometimes it has to do with being a mama. Because when you do a film, you have to commit 3 months. And sometimes a film, we live in New York, and sometimes a film I shoot in Poland,
right,
which is really difficult for the children, or me taking the children with the tutor. Modeling was 3-4 days. There were jobs that were, and then if the child was sick, I can cancel the job. They can get another model. I can be home. So it was much more easy to manage.
More in control.
More in control of motherhood, and that's why I liked it better.
I love the fact that that's your answer. You understand that on the acting side, even if you like modeling better, Blue Velvet is probably the movie that people think.
Yes.
About, and you're okay with that.
Yes.
It's a little creepy.
Yes, but it's a pretty good film.
But it's a great movie.
You know, and it's about women's abuse. You know, it's about women abuse, and I think we were very open about it and sincere about it. And I think what confused, at first the film was controversial because Dorothy Valance, the character I play, is a nightclub singer, and she hides behind her beauty. She's all made up, and she has the perfect hair, and she hides. She makes herself like a doll to hide this devastation. She's raped ritually. Her child has been horribly abused. Her child has been kidnapped. Her husband has been dead. She thinks he might be dead or not, but eventually he was killed. But you know, I grew up in Italy in the 70s, where we had a lot of kidnappings, which is a horrible crime. And people that are kidnapped, when they come, if they're not killed and they come back, they often suffer of what's called the Stockholm Syndrome, which is they become complice of the people that perpetrate the horror on them. And that's what I shaped my Dorothy Valance.
Well, it's one of the most extraordinary performances in an extraordinary career, and I you know, it's what a treat to get to talk to you about this stuff. I wish we had more time.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the show. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Isabella Rossellini,
thank you for having me. Thank you.
We'd love to have you join us in the studio. Visit our website at klru.org/overheard to find invitations to interviews, Q&As with our audience and guests, and an archive of past episodes.
I'm a raconteur, and my father was one.
Right. Well,
I always tell stories.
It's kind of in the DNA, isn't it?
It's a little bit in the DNA. Finally, I had a daughter, very, very straight, and when she was little, he would say, "No, Mama, that didn't happen," and she would always correct me, and I said, "Well, it's funnier if I tell it that way."
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's not a lie; it's a coloratura, to give it a little bit of color.
Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, a Texas government affairs consultancy, Claire and Carl Stewart, and by Laura and John Beckworth, Hobby Family Foundation.